Ever since Rishi Sunak came into office, there has been a very, very obvious change in the mood music between the UK and the EU, most notably, really, from our side, because, well, certainly under Johnson and under Truss, these two, shall we say, sides that were in at the time were very, very antagonistic to the EU. We talked about before that certainly under the Johnson government, they were not interested in having any discussions with the EU until at least 2022. Quite a shocking claim indeed. And then you obviously had Liz Truss's government bringing in this new Brexit Bill, which would essentially completely and utterly allow the government to basically make whatever change it wanted to the Northern Ireland Protocol without having to go and negotiate or even talk it through with the EU. So bear in mind, there has been a very, very significant change. And with the continuing news that, well, there is no good news about Brexit, obviously getting rid of the ministerial position for, the Brexit Opportunities Minister that was very sort of, quickly, hurriedly got away by Rishi Sunak. He is desperately trying to improve relations in any way he can with the EU because he knows, we all know it, we need to have good relations with the EU. We need them to be a good trading partner, and really, we need to do better deals because the one that Boris Johnson did simply was not a good deal. Even these new trade deals we have done with Australia and New Zealand are just not really providing the, shall we say, the boost, or at least the growth opportunities that was hoped for. We only just saw a couple of weeks ago how the Japan trade deal, one that was trumpeted as being absolutely fantastic, as something that we can now do out of the EU. Guess what? Japan is now trading less with us. But you say, I thought we had these new deals so that we could do trade with all these new countries. Well, of course, we said it before, we've said it again. Trade gravity is a thing. Countries always trade with their closest partners. Who is our closest partners? It's the EU. So there is a lot of panic, especially in the Brexit quarters, because as we said before, just yesterday, indeed, on our video about the Tories' very misleading claim about the £800 billion in new trade deals. Again, new, you'll notice now that they've now dropped that from the claim after the watchdog reprimanded them. They are now starting to get quite worried because the polls are very clearly turning against Brexit. It's very, very clearly that businesses are starting to get agitated and uppity and wanting sort of closer ties, even saying we want back in to the European market and single customs union. The tide is starting to turn against them. As I said, a couple of days ago in another video, where we are now, with this change in public opinion, we were really predicting, and even a lot of people in the Remain side were predicting, it might be maybe another 6 or 7 years before we actually reach that point. So it is fantastic that we are here now. We are making big strides. But of course, this is the point where we also sort of have to worry about the Brexiteers, because if they get desperate, as we've seen before, they will do desperate things to try and, shall we say, secure their Brexit. And of course, one of the big things is, of course, the bill that would, shall we say, completely scupper the Northern Ireland Protocol, even potentially being put on ice while Rishi Sunak, shall we say, negotiates with the EU to sort of actually really sort out the problems. We always said it, the problems with the Northern Ireland Protocol are sortable, but it just involves both sides having to sit down and talk it out and negotiate. But as we've always said in these types of situations, the Brexiteers will view any form of negotiation as capitulation. And this is now what is going on. The Brexiteers in Parliament are starting to get very, very worried that Sunak and Jeremy Hunt are going to betray Brexit. And they are making some interesting moves in Parliament. So bear that in mind, that things could happen in and around Brexit very, very quickly and very, very, shall we say, fast, because, well, these Brexiteers are, shall we say, used to getting rid of leaders who, shall we say, don't happen to fulfill their Brexit whims. So this is yet another potential problem area for Rishi Sunak. So before we go over today's story, like I say, this is only covered in the Daily Mail. Obviously, it's from the Brexiteers side, so forgive me on that one. But like I say, it's the only real place where this is sort of news, this type of news is being reported. So bear that in mind as well. Like I say, please do remember to hit the like, share, and subscribe button. And of course, down below, there are links to my Patreon page, my one-off donation link called Buy Me Coffee, where you can buy me coffee. There is the one-off donation link from YouTube as well, called the YouTube thank you button. There is also the Pony Club as well. You can join as well. So over we go today to the Mail Online with their story on this. Of MPs urge Rishi Sunak to stand firm over the Brexit bill. Amid rumours it will go on ice to smooth out talks with the EU. Eurosceptic Tory MPs last night have urged Rishi Sunak to proceed with the Brexit bill, after reports that he has put it on ice in a bid to improve relations with the EU, which, again, is the sensible thing to do while you are having negotiations, because, to be honest, this bill is just not even necessary at all. It was very much done as basically sticking a middle finger up to Europe, saying we are going to do whatever the hell we like, which, again, you can't, because we signed an international agreement over this. And breaking that international agreement is not a good look for the UK. But anyway, back to it. So, when he was Prime Minister, Boris Johnson introduced legislation to allowing Britain to unilaterally withdraw from the Northern Ireland Protocol, the post-Brexit trading agreements between Great Britain and Northern Ireland, if the EU refused to compromise. I love that. If the EU refused to compromise. How about the UK, maybe compromises as well? Because overall, these compromises aren't exactly earth-shattering, really. But the bill, which has already passed through the Commons, will now return to the Lords this year. It comes amid the optimism about finding agreement with the EU. So, shockingly, when we sit down with the EU and we talk and negotiate, we can find common ground. Who knew? Who knew negotiation was such a good thing to do? But of course, as we've said before, Brexiteers see negotiation with the EU as capitulation. Senior figures in the government believe that a deal can be reached before the 25th anniversary of the Good Friday Agreement in April. Tory MPs said that Mr. Sunak must, quote, press on with the legislation. As we said, negotiation is seen as capitulation. Former Cabinet Minister John Redwood had this to say: the EU treat all delays as weakness. They have shown no sign whatsoever to make any changes to make the protocol work. The EU have been constantly saying ideas. If you follow this negotiation like we've been doing, they have been constantly saying, we can do this, there's this idea, we can do this, or we can do this, or maybe we can try looking at this. It has been the UK until very, very recently, until Rishi Sunak came into government, that has been saying, whoa, we're not going to do any of that whatsoever. Anyway, back to it. So David Jones, a member of the European Research Group of Tory MPs, said it is absolutely essential that we press on with the bill and, if necessary, invoke the Parliamentary Act to get it through the Lords. That level of determination will show the EU we mean business. Last night, a government spokesperson said the bill had not been paused and will continue its passage in the new year. So already, you can see that the European Research Group are building up for a fight in the new year. This is going to cause Rishi Sunak big problems, because if you want to improve trade and make sure that Britain's trade, and we don't go into a very costly trade war, which will hugely hurt the UK, it will affect Europe, but not as much as it will us. Let's put it that way. You do not want to go into a trade war, and potentially going forward with this bill could very, very easily ignite a trade war. The EU has been very clear that this bill will probably ignite a trade war. Because once that bill's in place, it then gives these Eurosceptic Tory MPs power to start altering unilaterally bits about the Northern Ireland Protocol, which the EU has said, no, you cannot do. So this comes very, very dangerous, because you have seen, ultimately, I do not think this bill will pass the House of Lords. I really do not think it will. I've said before, as much as I want to, reform and completely abolish the House of Lords and resign it to history, in many cases like this, I am sort of glad we have had it, because it has been the only place where sensible discussions about Brexit, and certainly the consequences of Brexit, have actually been discussed. So I really do not think this will pass through. And if they are deadly serious, as the ERG have plainly said there, we will use an act of parliament to force this through. They're building up for a fight. There is going to be another fight next year in and around the Northern Ireland Protocol. You can basically guarantee it. And the ERG, the new leader there, the ERG there, has plainly said it. We intend to fight and make sure this bill gets pushed through. And yet, there's still this talk that this bill is going to be put on ice. Will it be put on ice? Will Sunak risk a Tory rebellion? And bear in mind, the ERG and these pro-Brexit Tories are very, very adept at getting rid of Tory leaders. So, well, I'll definitely have to wait and see how this plays out in the new year. But yeah, this is certainly not, shall we say, good news for Rishi Sunak on that front. That is for absolutely sure in this case. But as always, we'll be keeping an eye on it, and of course bring you any news or updates that we might see in and around this. But we can only hope that at least this bill just does get put on ice and does get resigned. But even then, there will probably be a Tory rebellion about this bill, which again will cause huge problems for Rishi Sunak and potentially even bring down his government. Like I say, either way, Sunak's in a lot of trouble. He's between a rock and a hard place, and he has absolutely no room to maneuver on, not only on things like this Brexit bill, but the EU Reform and Revocation Bill, or the Brexit Freedoms Bill, as it's now being called by the Brexiteers. A ton of stuff. He has absolutely no room to maneuver whatsoever. And as we've always said continuously about Rishi Sunak's government, it is a house of cards built on quicksand on an earthquake fault line, and anything could just cause it to go very quickly. So we don't know what's going to cause it to go, but hey, this is certainly one thing that could certainly cause that entire house of cards to come crumbling down very quickly. And those Eurosceptic MPs have shown that they are more than willing to do this. So, as always, thank you very much for watching. Please do remember to hit that like, share, and subscribe button. And of course, down below, there are links to my Patreon page and a motivation link called Buy Me Coffee, where you can buy me coffee. And as always, thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you all next time.